design. My name is Joshua Sledge, and I'm a director with the Center for Financial Services Innovation. On today's webinar, we will take a look at the results coming out of CFSI's Financial Capability Innovation Funds, which supported 13 different pilot projects that tested innovative strategies for helping consumers adopt and healthy financial behaviors. The findings from these projects offer some actionable tactics that organizations and companies can adopt to design product programs that will successfully help consumers to save money, reduce debt, and gain control of their overall financial lives. We'll share a selection of project findings, and you'll hear directly from a few of our grantees about their experience. And at the end of this hour, we hope to walk away with new ideas that you can apply to engage your clients and customers in building their financial health. Today, I'm joined by a really great group of panelists, including my colleague, Teresa Schmall, business associate here at CFSI. Also joining us are guest speakers from 3 of the 3 projects. Representing the Lift Up project from the National Cities, we have Denise Belzer and Stephanie Moulton from the Center for Financial Security at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, who is the evaluator for NLC's project. Representing the Magic Mojo project, we have Jessica Durant from the University of North Carolina Center for Community Capital, the project evaluation partner. And last but certainly not least, we have Peter Rubenstein from Solutions for Progress, who will tell us about the Management Coach project. Let's quickly go over the agenda for today's call. First, my colleague Teresa will provide an overview of Financial Capability Innovation Funds and highlight some of the high-level insights and findings that we saw across the project that made up the total fund portfolio. After that, you'll hear directly from our panelists about their experiences building their projects. We'll hear about the key findings that emerged from their pilots, and they'll offer some advice for organizations and companies based on what they learned. Then I will lead the discussion with the panelists to help us dig a little bit deeper into what it actually takes to implement the strategies that they developed and they found to be effective. Finally, we'll have an open Q&A session where we'll provide time for the audience to ask questions that have come up throughout the webinar and in real time. As a reminder, you can submit questions using the panel on the GoToWebinar tool throughout the course of this presentation. I also want to make note that this webinar is only the beginning of our effort to share learnings from the fund. We'll be releasing a series of blogs after this to share more findings from all of the portfolio projects that include ideas for how you might be able to adapt and deploy the tactics that have been effective to date. We'll provide more information about this series at the end of the webinar. So now let's move into our presentation. And with that, I will turn it over to Teresa.
Thank you, Josh. We'll start with the overview of the Financial Capability Innovation Funds. The Citi Foundation and CFSI launched the Innovation Funds to find out what might be possible and test new strategies for changing behaviors to improve the financial lives of low-income and underserved consumers. Through 2 competitive RFP processes, 13 grantee projects were selected. These were innovative nonprofit-led projects designed to promote the financial capability of low-income and underserved consumers and ultimately enrich their financial health through improved financial behaviors. The funds provided $4 million to the grantees thanks to the support of a coalition of funders led by the Citi Foundation and including the diverse array of funders that are seen on the screen here. In addition to the money, the grantees received advice, strategized with their peer network, and underwent robust evaluations to understand the successes and areas for growth in their projects. None of this would have been possible without the support of the funders. Now we'll dive into some of the consumer insights on what works to improve consumer financial behaviors based on the strategies, products, and services tested through the funds. The first successful feature we'll talk about is simple but effective, timely and relevant messaging. The XIF grantees looked at how technology can be used to help consumers adapt positive financial behaviors. One successful, cost-effective strategy is using text messaging to supplement financial products and services. Several grantees found that sending text messages to customers led to improved consumer financial behaviors, with specific findings around behaviors connected to payments, credit, and engagement. What they found indicates that providers have the opportunity to improve consumer engagement with their financial products and services, reinforce timely payments, and improve consumer credit scores through real-time, cost-effective messaging. Different grantees took different approaches to the structure of their messaging, but the overall takeaway is that the importance is to get guidance to consumers at the time when it is most useful, whether that be through text, push notifications, email, or other messaging tools. One successful project that used messaging was Clarify's Borrow Less Tomorrow program. Clarify sent messages on a scheduled basis through Bolt, which explored the most effective ways to improve consumers' debt repayment behaviors by sending consumers messages with varied frequencies and approaches. They found that low frequency and task-oriented messages were the most effective in driving positive repayment behavior. Clarify's clients receiving these types of messages were 8% more likely to stick to their scheduled repayment amounts in any given month than clients who received no reminder messages, and these results were statistically significant. Another example of successful messaging is Meta's Vita Credit Building Project. Meta tested a text-based financial coaching app that sent messages directly to clients based on their transaction activities. The project helped secured card users take positive steps to avoid credit missteps. Meta is working to further analyze the data to articulate the impact, and more information on this project is to come. Additionally, Juma's Ventures College Set Facebook application used messaging. This app applied a text messaging alert system to facilitate two-way communication on an online platform to allow students to interact with College Set's employees. This created more personalized connections with their youth savings for college website. Juma received positive feedback from students and found that the technology was most influential based on the relationship between the partner organizations and the students themselves. National League of Cities also implemented texting into their tool, and they will tell us more in the Grantee Spotlights section. Another successful strategy in improving consumer financial behaviors is incorporating online platforms. Several FCIF grantees work to add an online component to supplement or replace in-person financial products and services in order to maximize consumer engagement and improve consumer financial behaviors. Incorporating the online component proved to be a successful means of efficiently and effectively reaching a variety of consumers, ranging from high school students to adult employees. The grantees that tested online platforms found that it worked best to use online to improve efficiency and increase touch points with clients. The feature can be a resource that is available to consumers at all times, make them feel safe and secure in discussing their financial behaviors, and is a cost-effective and scalable strategy for providers. One example of this is through MyTask program that provides an online interface to give financial coaching to youth and workforce development programs. They've seen high engagement with the technology, as well as high rates of youth reaching their savings goals when using the technology. There has also been nearly universal increases in the use of financial products and services from their clients. Another grantee project, Neighborhood Trust Financial Partners, uses a PayGoal product that has online coaching. PayGoal is a product that provides workplace financial coaching enhanced by a prepaid card and an online tool designed to promote budgeting and goal attainment. Early evaluations show signs of promise that PayGoal will be a useful tool for consumers in reaching their savings goals. More detail is to come from PayGoal evaluations and will be highlighted in the upcoming blog series. My Budget Coach also used the balance of tech and touch in their financial coaching, and they'll be presenting later in this webinar to provide more insight into this area. Another successful strategy is using positive consumer incentives in your products and services. Many of the FCIF grantees incorporated positive incentives in the form of tools ranging from improved repayment options to gamification strategies to improve consumer performance and ultimately create better financial behaviors. These strategies demonstrated that applying behavioral economics to financial products and services can successfully impact consumers' behaviors and benefit both the consumers and the providers. By tapping into a person's desire to receive positive reinforcement through offering actual money savings, virtual prizes, and other rewards, providers were able to help consumers perform better financially and more successfully use their financial products and services. For example, the Doorway to Dreams Fund Savings Quest project is an online mobile platform that successfully incorporates principles of gamification to encourage savings among prepaid card users. The product is currently offered in collaboration with Banking Upside Card and employs gaming principles such as badges, challenges, and levels for users to help promote savings in the card's rainy day reserve pocket. The results have shown that Savings Quest users saved more in frequency and in dollar value than other rainy day reserve savers that did not enroll in the Savings Quest platform. More detail on the specific improvements that we're seeing with Savings Quest can be seen in an upcoming D2D report that will be released in early October, as well as the blog series from CFSI. Another project that successfully used positive incentives was Filene's Lower Interest for Timeliness program that offered interest rate reductions to borrowers for making timely loan payments. Lyft found that borrowers at 3 of their 4 participating locations had lower rates of making a late payment than their control group. This was statistically significant at 2 of their sites. Lyft borrowers also ended up with stronger positive attitudes towards their lenders, and that was even controlling for loan terms, fees, and penalties. Positive consumer incentives were also applied through Piggy Mojo's harnessing of people's impulsive behaviors and National League of Cities product. Later in this presentation, we will hear more from both of these groups. The last successful feature we'll talk about in this part of the presentation is social network accountability. This is a successful strategy in improving consumer financial behaviors by working in conjunction with or sharing progress with social networks. In doing this, consumers typically improved their consumer financial health. This was especially true when social networks were tied to financial education programming. While success was also found in applying social networks to lending products and services, there is also reason to exercise caution when adding social features to repayment programming. One successful use of social networks tested through the FCIS was in MoneyThink, a financial coaching program that works with high school students. MoneyThink allowed users to share their financial behaviors with friends and engage in different challenges around responsible savings and spending. They found that when students received likes on their photos that showed positive financial behaviors, there was a correlation with those same students participating in more financial challenges. Additionally, MoneyThink found that students became more mindful about their spending and saving when they used this app that had social accountability features. Another strategy incorporating social networks was through Mission Asset's peer lending program, Lending Circles. Lending circles are designed to help consumers build credit and transition into the financial mainstream. Each lending circle brings together a group of people that make a contribution to a central fund and then take turns loaning out the money. The Mission Asset Fund reports monthly activity to the credit bureaus, which helps participants build credit. On average, clients participating in these social circles increase their credit scores by 168 points, and additionally, the loan default rate for Lending Circles programs was less than 1%. These improvements were especially stated for customers that had thin or no credit files at the beginning of their participation. While these programs were successful examples of adding social components, Clarified's Borrow Less Tomorrow program that had successful messaging found that social accountability had low take-up in their debt repayment plans. They believe this might indicate that people prefer not to share their debt repayment needs with family and friends, and instead feel more comfortable sharing this information with peers, like in the case of the Lending Circles program. That brings together all of the consumer insights that we want to share from the overall piece of the fund. This is just a small piece of what we learned about what has worked through this work. Now I'll turn it over to Josh.
Thank you, Teresa. As you can see, we've got a lot of grantee projects coming out that have some really interesting findings. We want to give you all an opportunity to hear about the experience of developing these projects and some of the advice coming from these the projects from the grantees themselves. So today we have a few of our grantees with us to talk about their work. So we'll start with Denise Belzer and Stephanie Moulton from the National League of Cities Lift Up project. Then we'll hear from Jess Durant from the Piggy Mojo or Magic Mojo project. And finally, we'll hear from Peter Rubenstein, from Solutions for Progress and the My Budget Coach program. I want to remind everyone that if you have questions as you hear the presenters talking, feel free to, again, use the GoToWebinar tool to send those in. And at the end of the webinar, we will go through those and make sure we have a chance to ask them. So with that, Denise and Stephanie, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Josh. It's great to be part of today's webinar. So I'm going to provide a little background about what Lift Up is, and then Stephanie's going to talk more about some of the insights and learnings from the evaluation, and then we'll both wrap up from there. But just to cover a little bit on what NLC is. So NLC is a 501c3 membership organization. We advocate on behalf of cities, towns, and villages of all sizes. And actually, we can move to the next slide real quick. Okay. Thanks. And so here at the YES Institute, we target cities that are particularly interested in setting an action agenda on behalf of children, youth, and families. We're structured around 5 key program areas, which you see here, and Lift Up falls under our economic opportunity and financial empowerment portfolio. And so a little bit about Lift Up. And so Lift Up evolved from our work with cities over the years, knowing more could be done to assist a targeted group of people, specifically families that are struggling to pay back debt owed to city for services such as water and power. So we explored the magnitude of water utility delinquencies and learned that an increasing number of cities were indeed pushing for more aggressive debt collection programs to recoup declining revenue and to stretch city budgets. We can move to the next slide, thanks. So after tossing around some ideas on how city government could leverage existing city systems to engage families more holistically to create some kind of a win-win for both the city and its residents, we identified 3 core features of a framework, which you see here on the screen. And so the first one focused on targeting the right households in delinquency status and also creating a referral structure to a local financial empowerment provider. And this person we felt could assess and offer guidance on budgeting and other financial empowerment opportunities. So it's clear for us that the second key component of this framework will be access to financial empowerment products and programs. We felt strongly about this, so we asked each city to really flesh this important intervention out. Some cities offered a 1-hour counseling session, while others offered innovative financial coaching approaches. And finally, we felt cities could ease the burden for families by making the monthly payments more manageable, as other terms will also retooled to support participant needs. And from this framework of 3 key elements, we then came up with 5 items that we wanted to evaluate as part of our evaluation, which is also listed here. So very quickly, we can go to the next slide. Thanks. So very quickly, we've been partnering with 5 fantastic cities on Lift Up. Savannah, Georgia, Newark, New Jersey, Houston, Texas, St. Petersburg, Florida, and Louisville, Kentucky, to design, implement, and evaluate the model. Stephanie Moulton and her team have been thought partners with NLC from the very start, as we've all been trying to fly this plane literally while building it. And finally, we received some spot-on guidance from Josh Wright at Ideas 42, particularly during the take-up phase of the pilot, and this helped cities weave in lessons on consumer behavior for specifically this target population. So now I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie Moulton, and I will come back to help wrap up with her at the end. So Stephanie?
Yep, great, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so we want to share with you a few key consumer impacts that we learned from implementing the Lift Up program. And I should mention that our evaluation is underway. We have not yet completed the evaluation. Cities are about 6 months into the some of the cities have finished and some of the cities are still in progress. So by the end of December, we'll have the final evaluation of the results. So these are early results that we're learning. The first one is that we do see that there was demand for the Lift Up program. We initially projected offering it to 2,000 utility customers, but actually ended up offering it to over 3,000 customers across 5 cities. The take-up rate we thought would be about 1 in 4, 25%. So these are customers who have either lost their water or at risk of losing water, have some history of having water shut off in the recent past. So we thought that they would be highly motivated to take advantage of the program. One of the big incentives of taking advantage of the program is that they get to retain water services. So if they've lost water services, they actually get to keep their water services if they follow through with the program, which we thought would be a powerful motivator. And in fact, we did see that there was a variation in the take-up rate across cities based on some of these different strategies in terms of how they market the program. So for example, in one of the cities, using a postcard to promote an incentive, getting cash if you were to sign up, was not as effective as using a postcard to mention the potential loss of water. So it's kind of tying into that loss aversion behavioral aspect actually motivated take-up of the program more. Next slide. We also, one of the early impacts that we're seeing, participants that enrolled in LiftUp so far have demonstrated some reduced subsequent water loss, water terminations. They're making their water bills more regularly. We see statistically fewer terminations in 2 cities, in Houston and St. Petersburg. Another positive benefit is that these households are incurring fewer avoidable fees, which are fees such as interest rate penalties or shutoff charges that they would otherwise get for not paying their water bills. Next slide. And we're also seeing reduced participant water bill balances. So there's a trade-off between, with the restructured repayment plan that we have built into LiftUp, participants are put on an affordable payment plan that to align a bit with their budget. So many of them may have a past due balance in some cities as high as $2,000. In other cities, they cap the past due balance at a smaller amount, like $200. And depending on how long the cities were willing to restructure that payment for, it could have been 4 months to 24 months, for example. If you restructure a large bill for a long amount of time, you end up with a balance that doesn't go down quite as quickly. So we've definitely seen a trade-off in cities that have restructured the payments for a longer period of time. It takes longer for those balances to go down. However, if you don't restructure the payment enough, then you end up not with households that are unable to sustain the monthly payment. And we also are starting to see a change in habits. In Newark, households were in a habit of paying their water bill about once a quarter. And simply putting in this monthly repayment structure through LiftUp and the financial empowerment services we've provided, we've been able to help build new habits where participants are starting to pay more regularly in smaller amounts instead of making one large bill each quarter. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next, thank you. So we wanted to highlight 5 kind of key lessons learned out of the program. There's a lot of lessons that we have, but 5 key lessons. One is targeting the right customers at the right time. So I mentioned the loss aversion piece. This also ties into the timing of when water is going to be shut off. So when you're partnering with a municipality and you're trying to target customers, it's often useful to think about what the incentives are to get them to enroll. And in this case, the loss of water became a very powerful incentive if the timing was right. So if we were timing the offer of LiftUp around the time when the participant would otherwise be losing their water services, it was much more powerful than if they had just had their water services reinstated or were no longer at risk. Then they were less likely to enroll. We also noticed seasonal variation in some cities. Water is not shut off. Just the city will not, for political reasons and humane reasons, not shut off water services during the winter months, for example. And in those cities, we had low enrollment during the winter months because that wasn't an immediate threat. We also learned about the trade-off between prescriptive and customized payment plans. In some of our cities, the same payment plan was offered to every customer, which we call prescriptive. This became easier for cities to implement. All customers, for example, would get to renegotiate their past due debt for 4 months. However, that could create a challenge for a customer that has a large past due balance, where prescriptive payment plans that actually are tailored to the individual budgets are better, but those are more difficult to administer. So there's a trade-off between those 2 things. The third learning was to align the empowerment tools with customer needs. We've learned that the different customers have different hardships that cause them to fall behind, and making sure that whatever the counseling strategies are that are being offered are very important to align those to their needs. And then also expanding capacity through partnerships. Most of these cities did not have in-house financial empowerment providers, so part of the big learning was simply building that infrastructure so they could make those referrals. And then finally, the timing to the launch matters. And as I mentioned before, depending on the time of the season, we may or may not experience customers who are motivated to take up the program. So those are some key learnings. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Denise and Stephanie. That's very, very interesting things. Now we're going to turn it over to Jess to talk a little bit about the Magic Mojo project.
Great. Thanks. And I also want to start by saying thanks to CFSI for the opportunity to join this webinar. We were really happy to get to be a part of the Financial Capability Innovation Fund. And as mentioned in the introduction, our role at the Center for Community Capital was as a research partner with a product called Piggy Mojo, which became known as Magic Mojo in the pilot. It's an impulse savings tool, and I'll say more about that in the next few slides. But our role, we evaluated the pilot looking at a range of metrics. So by way of background on Piggy Mojo, I'll start by saying a little bit about the concept of impulse savings. So it's true that sometimes changing behaviors can be hard. So maybe there are ways that an existing behavior can be used with a different result. And that's a question that Piggy Mojo asked. What if the desire that we all sometimes feel to make an impulsive purchase, and I'm guessing many of you know what that feels like, what if that impulsive feeling could be leveraged as a way to help someone save money rather than spend it? So Piggy Mojo created a savings tool that allowed users to save money on impulse. So it's not planned savings, it's not money left over at the end of the month, which can be really difficult for many households since sometimes there isn't anything left over at the end of the month. Instead, this is savings in a moment when you may have a few extra dollars to set aside. And so for this pilot, Piggy Mojo partnered with the Magic Card, a prepaid MasterCard, to launch Magic Mojo. And it was structured as an optional add-on feature to the Magic Card. So if someone enrolled in Magic Mojo, that created a savings pocket on the card. And that gave the user the ability to move money into savings instantly via text message. Next slide. So the next few slides show some screens of what it looks like to enroll in Magic Mojo. You would sign up online and answer some questions about savings goals. Here you can see it's asking for the goal, what you want to save for. You can give the goal a name and choose an image if you want to represent the goal. Next slide. You'd go through a few more screens and then you could start saving right away using a text message to move money from the spending side of the card to the saving side of the card. There was also an option to set up a recurring save, which would move money to the saving side of the card each week automatically. Next slide. So I'll jump right into our results, and I want to highlight 4 key consumer-related findings, many of which are relevant for consumers across the income spectrum. So first, we found that saving with Magic Mojo was dynamic. Money was moving into and out of the saving side of the card pretty frequently. So for example, someone might move money into the savings side of the card on Friday, but then move some of those funds back out a week later when they needed the money. Secondly, more than 1/3 of our users identified an emergency fund as their savings goal, and this was by far the most commonly selected goal. I'll say, though, that we were pretty struck by the broad range of savings goals that users selected, which I think really speaks to the variety of savings needs and desires that consumers have. Next slide. Third, the way the tool was structured allowed users to have easy access to their savings. So a user would go online and move the money back to the spending side of the card. And we found in our analysis that just over half of users reported taking money out of savings in order to do things like pay bills or to pay for something unexpected. So users were also frequently indicating that they moved money back to the spending side of the card in order to buy something, but we don't have data on what that something was. So it could be something essential that they needed. And then the last thing I want to highlight is that we found that people who used a combination of impulse saves along with the automated and recurring saves that I mentioned earlier, those users had the highest number of saved transactions and the highest amount saved compared to people that used just one or the other of those methods by themselves. So that's not necessarily surprising, but again, I think it points to a desire for some flexibility, both in terms of what to save for, but also how to save. And we see some benefits from offering more than one option. Next slide. So, for us, what we thought really worked about Magic Mojo was that, one, it didn't require a lot of planning. There was flexibility in what you could save for. There was more than one way to save. The tool allowed access to funds when needed, providing liquidity for consumers. And then in this case, because it was offered on a prepaid card, it didn't require a bank account. And I think this may be especially appealing to consumers that don't have or don't want or maybe can't get a traditional account. They would still have a way to securely put money aside. Next slide. So I guess I'll just end with some general recommendations or more of a thought about opportunities for providers. The concept of impulse savings is really applicable across a wide range of decision points. I mean, people frequently make spending decisions, and if you give them a mechanism to save in those moments, you can potentially impact their financial stability over the longer term, either by building up savings towards a goal or just by allowing them to securely set money aside when they can and then easily tap into those funds when they're needed. It's also applicable, I think, across multiple types of savings tools. So in this case, it was a prepaid card, which was a really nice fit, but it seems like it could be attached to a traditional checking or savings account or used with some other tools. Last slide. And I will just end by saying thanks again to CFSI, and for anyone who's interested, a report with more details on our findings is just recently available on our website at ccc.unc.edu.
Great. Thanks, Jess. And yeah, for the rest of the audience, I definitely encourage you to go to the site, check out the full report. Jess was just able to really scrape the surface. There's some really rich findings about how to promote savings amongst low and moderate income consumers and prepaid card holders. So definitely check it out. All right. Last but not least, Peter.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for everyone's time, and of course, thank you to CFSI for all your support. I'm going to share with you some early findings from our My Budget Coach pilot. I led the development of My Budget Coach while working in a small nonprofit asset-building organization in Hartford, Connecticut, with a successful in-person paper-based coaching program. Just after development was finished, that organization went under for reasons unrelated to My Budget Coach. My Budget Coach is now operated by Solutions for Progress of Philadelphia. Next slide, please. Solutions for Progress is unique in what we combine, the full-service technology development and support operation with a public policy research team, and we're experts through years of operating services in the field in outreach methods targeting low and moderate income families and individuals. Next slide. The My Budget Coach service is a customizable cloud-based suite of financial coaching tools and curriculum that facilitates the delivery of financial coaching services to clients either remotely or in person. The My Budget Coach service also enables organizations to collect and analyze program data to measure outcomes. The service includes the financial capability curriculum and tools to assist clients with budgeting and goal attainment, along with timely and relevant alerts. We are working with the Center for Financial Security at the University of Wisconsin to evaluate the pilot project, which is due to conclude at the end of this year. Next slide. I'm sorry, one back. For the pilot, we recruited just over 300 low and moderate income participants in Maryland, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Texas. Once intake data was collected, the participant was randomly assigned to 2 service delivery groups, in-person delivery and online-only delivery. Those assigned to the in-person group meet with their coach face-to-face to go through the online modules together. Those assigned to the online-only group meet only remotely using a free screen sharing tool and the telephone. All pilot participants use the My Budget Coach online platform in between meetings with their coach to access additional content and use the online tools. The pilot program contains 12 learning modules, which can make up the 12 monthly meetings between the participant and the coach. In addition to a comprehensive intake and exit data collection process, we use the financial capability scale developed by Michael Collins at the Center for Financial Security. And the pilot seeks to answer the following research questions. Is My Budget Coach an effective tool in delivering positive changes in financial behaviors and improve financial wellness? Will outcome measures for participants receiving the coaching online only improve as much as those receiving coaching in person? And how will My Budget Coach impact an individual organization's or network of organizations' ability to implement a financial coaching program? Next slide. So let's move on to some of the highlights of the pilot data. And the data that we're going to be looking at was pulled this past July. Many of our pilot participants have difficulty saving money. Using the My Budget Coach goal tracker, pilot participants reported saving almost $90,000 towards savings goals so far. Our pilot participants also support a substantial amount of debt. And again, using the My Budget Coach goal tracker, they reported paying down over $54,000 in debt. Next slide. Having a spending plan can be a crucial milestone in achieving financial stability and wellness. At intake, for those completing at least 5 sessions, approximately, no, one more. Thank you. At intake, for those completing at least 5 sessions, approximately 70% of our pilot participants did not have a budget. By the 5th session, 100% reported that they do now have a spending plan. Looking at the difference between those working online and in person, we saw a greater increase in percentage terms for those working remotely. While we're looking today at data that was pulled for folks who have completed at least 5 sessions, at the 5th session, we do see very significant improvements in financial behavior after just 3 meetings with a coach. Next slide. The ability to set and achieve a financial goal is another key component of financial wellness. Almost 2/3 of our participants weren't sure of their ability to complete a goal at intake. But by session 5, we're seeing improvements that now show 2/3 of the pilot participants now very confident in their ability to achieve a financial goal. And this is also reflected in the savings and debt repayment data that we just talked about as well. Next slide. Our participants report significant improvements when asked if they're living within their means. And it's worth noting that we're seeing a greater increase in real and percentage terms for those working remotely with their coach. Of interest, the vast majority of the improvements that we're seeing are happening as the participants complete the first half of the 12 coaching sessions. Our thinking is that a 6-month intervention might be a more realistic engagement period, and session content could be reworked into those 6 sessions. At the same time, we don't want to discount the 12-month engagement period completely. It is possible that the second half of the current curriculum may be where behaviors that were initially changed in the first 6 months are firmed up so that the results are longer lasting. Next slide. So recommendations from our findings. So we have found that remote delivery is successful, but we know that it's not for everyone. But we do know that it can be an effective way of delivery, as effective as any other form of program delivery, even for low-income individuals, and provides the flexibility to overcome some of the challenges one might have from meeting in person. One example that I'd like to give, we have a site in Baltimore that was unable to find qualified coaches for volunteers. They tapped into a network of FINRA military spouse fellows who are living on U.S. military bases in places like South Korea, Japan, and Germany, and they are now working with pilot participants in Baltimore. We also know that provider networks matter quite a bit. In particular, the My Budget Coach provider network in Maryland, operated by the Maryland Cash Campaign, formed learning groups which allow providers to support each other through monthly calls and other engagements. To reach its full potential, financial coaching as a field requires standardization of training and certifications, outcome measures, and technology. For training, groups like AFCPE are working towards establishing standard financial coach training. The financial coaching or financial capability scale on the measurement side is a great standard way of using outcome measures that can be comparable across programs. And of course, services like My Budget Coach are one way to offer a standard set of technology for financial coaching. So we, in terms of the partners that we work with, one of the research questions was, how is this helping them to scale financial coaching or to use this program within their other mix of programs? And we clearly heard that My Budget Coach allowed them, they loved it because it provides a platform for partners to conduct consistent high-quality coaching without having to create standalone programs or coaching processes. So with that, again, I want to thank CFSI again for their support and look forward to your questions.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Peter. And thanks to all the panelists. I've got some questions for you that I want to ask so we can dig a bit deeper as to what it actually looks like to implement some of these projects. I think it's really helpful to hear the results and some of the impact you've been able to have on consumers. But, you know, there's always the question of how do you actually get these things off the ground? And for some of our audience, you know, providing them a little bit of insight as to how they may be able to adopt some of the strategies and implement them in their own environment. But before we do that, I first wanted to ask each of the groups, if they could give us just a quick update on how the projects have developed since the pilot and where they're hoping to take them in the future. Just kind of, you know, we've ended the initial pilots and where do we see things going? We'll start with the group at NLC.
Great, thanks, Josh. So as Stephanie mentioned, we're actually still in a stage now where we're collecting the data from our cities. And we're going to have a final evaluation report to be shared in early 2016. So where we are right now is we're still learning. We're still getting information, but we're excited about what we're seeing so far. We have been fortunate, though, to receive additional funding from the Ford Foundation to continue our efforts for another 2 years. Part of that's going to help us disseminate the results. And we've seen that cities are really interested in this. It seems to resonate with them. And so we're going to be sharing the learnings that we talked about more broadly. We're going to be really kind of lifting up the results and working with cities because we know that this is something that's important to them. But we're also going to continue working with 2 of the cities. We haven't selected them yet, but we're going to continue to work with 2 of them to identify additional features of the model and maybe add in certain things such as a savings component to kind of build on what we've learned. You know, we really want to get at, you know, making sure that we're identifying the right interventions that are useful to the group that we're targeting. And so I would probably say over the next 12 months, we're going to be working on refining the model and enhancing it, and then doing another, some type of an evaluation after that, and then having more to share with you probably in early 2017.
Great, great. And Peter?
Sure. My Budget Coach has definitely moved beyond the pilot phase. We are working with groups in Maryland. Our pilot partner actually is now, they have purchased a license to use My Budget Coach and are expanding its presence statewide in Maryland. The same goes for Ohio. And we actually have some other states, one coming on actually quite soon, and others that we're in discussions with. We're also working with individual organizations nationwide, several of which who have licensed My Budget Coach and who are using it. We've developed a white label version of My Budget Coach, which is being used by AFCPE. We built the AFCPE Achieve system modeled on My Budget Coach, which their financial counselors are using in the field.
Great, great. And Jess?
So the Magic Mojo pilot ended, and unfortunately the Magic Card is no longer being offered. So the Magic Mojo impulse savings tool is not being offered with that card anymore, but I know that they are looking into other prepaid card providers to partner with, which I think is great. And something I didn't get to mention in the presentation, which I think is really significant, is that another finding was that having the savings feature attached to the card, it significantly increased the card activation and funding rates as well as the lifespan of the card. So it seems like a really a tool that's very effective paired with the card and has benefits, for card providers as well. So hopefully there will be a partnership happening again, but that's sort of the status of the project now.
Thanks. And yeah, that was a finding we at CFSI I thought was very interesting as well, and it really shows that by providing that savings feature, there may be some connection to just driving overall consumer engagement. Couldn't prove causality with what we had here, but seeing that connection that people that were using Magic Mojo were using their cards more, loading funds onto it at a more full rate was very exciting.
Yeah,
I've got some more questions for the moderator. For the panelists, but before I do, just want to remind everyone, if you have questions for any of the specific panelists or for the panel as a whole or for CFSI, you can ask those through the GoToWebinar tool, and we will be sure to ask those. I'd like to ask the panelists around implementation some of the biggest hurdles you faced in actually bringing your ideas to life. A lot of these projects were very complicated, had a lot of different either technical components or partnerships that were involved. Could you tell us a little bit about some of those hurdles, and if an audience member wanted to replicate your intervention, how would you suggest that they would tackle or avoid it? And we'll start back again with NLC.
Great, thank you, Josh. So I'll start off, and then I'm going to have Stephanie step in because she spent quite a bit of time working with the cities, helping to put in place a lot of the systems to evaluate the project. But the first thing I would say is that there was definitely substantial variation between the cities in terms of their structures, their designs, and their systems that basically were underlining the lift-up project. And it wasn't known to us when we started this, the level of variation that existed between the different municipal systems. So I would definitely say that assessing, who's at the table, are they the right people to be there? And we found that within the city, there were so many other people that actually needed to be at the table from the beginning. We didn't know it at the time. We just started with, one person at the utility, but we actually needed to rely on other people such as the IT department and others in order to make sure that we had the buy-in that we needed to do the things that we needed to do to design the systems. We also I would probably also say that, we want to assess what results we want to accomplish, are the right interventions being proposed, and who will provide them, and this gets into partnerships. And there were many partnerships with the LIFTA project. We also would say assess if you want to target a specific group of people or a broader population. And for this, I would say that resources, do you have sufficient resources? Because cities are stretching their budgets, as I mentioned earlier. And it's not so simple to do to design some of the interventions that we know would be effective, but definitely limited resources were at stake. And so, Stephanie, do you want to add anything else in terms of some of the biggest hurdles that you saw?
Yeah, I would just say really quickly, I think one of the, opportunities of this project is looking at on-ramps that already exist. So in a sense, that kind of reduces the hurdles. So we worked with existing utility providers. We weren't creating a new system. We weren't trying to create or find participants out there that were struggling, without having, we actually had an existing mechanism to identify them by working through the utility payment system. So I would encourage other financial innovation providers to look at opportunities to work through existing infrastructures where customers that might be struggling or might be in need of your financial services already exist, like utility payments. It's kind of surprising that this hadn't been done at, some scale before. Certainly there were challenges, but I think, just by working with an existing system, there's more hurdles up front, but then once you get it in place, it's more likely to be sustainable and you're more likely to be able to have take-up in volume.
Yeah, that's great, Stephanie. Yeah, I thought that was one of the, CFSI, one of the things we really thought was great about LiftUp is the use of utility data to, we always kind of called it a red flag, right? If you see a family that's struggling to pay their utilities on a timely basis or really falling behind, is that an indication that they may be in deeper financial distress, and is that a moment to reach out proactively? So I love that idea of finding ways that you can tap into existing systems to find clients for which the intervention may be a good fit. Peter, any thoughts around for you around some of the big hurdles around implementation?
Sure. The obvious one, obviously, we had to survive while our organization on the outside was dying. But outside of that, what the NLC folks mentioned about using existing infrastructure, when we built My Budget Coach, there weren't any other online financial coaching services out there. But for those now looking to replicate what we've done with remote coaching, there certainly is My Budget Coach, but there are other services for different kinds of providers. For employers, there's PayGoal, and there are other services out there to meet different needs. So definitely utilizing existing services and products. One thing we didn't do in working with our partners and individual participants was offer any kind of incentive or any kind of operating support. And because of that, there were some early hurdles in recruiting sites, because without operating support, they're not able to really devote the resources that they might be able to otherwise. So perhaps that's something to look at, incentives on the participant side and operating support help for the organizations. And then finally, a 12-month program is or can be a hard sell. 1 year of our lives is a very meaningful thing. So we think that some participants were certainly turned off and not able to engage because of that 12-month engagement period. We've yet to really understand the value of the 12 months, but perhaps a shorter engagement period could have solved that.
Yeah, and engagement's always so important, right? I think we saw with all these projects, and many more, the fun that the impact that we saw was real and really represented tangible benefits and changes in consumers' financial health. But if you can't get people to actually use the service, you can't get to that benefit. And so I'd love to kind of get Stephanie and Denise and Jeff, that you were engaged with PiggyMojo. Thoughts around engagement, ways that you thought were effective, things that you saw that seemed to draw clients in versus things that may have made it a little bit tougher for them to join. And Jeff, we'll start with you.
Okay, I would say in terms of engagement, making things as easy as possible for the user. I think that's critical. So reducing any kind of friction. In this case, with PiggyMojo, it was fairly simple to enroll. You went online, you went through a couple of screens, and then you were able to use the product right away. I think what's important, in addition to just getting that initial engagement and kind of take up, is keeping people engaged with the product over a longer period of time. And with PiggyMojo, again, particular goals that people selected. They would select an amount of time in which they wanted to achieve the goal. So in some cases, they weren't expecting to spend a lot of time saving for that goal, but ideally, they'd achieve that goal and move on to the next and remain engaged in the kind of project overall. And I think there are ways to help consumers stay engaged through things like reminders and providing useful information. So I'd say those things are all kind of key in terms of getting them engaged initially. Jason Halliday, who created PiggyMojo, could probably speak to that a bit better because we weren't directly involved in that piece. But from our perspective, those are things that we feel are important.
Great. And Denise and Stephanie?
Yeah, I would just say really quickly that we found that trust was really important, that for the person that's reaching out to the clients, in this case, the water customers, one of the cities actually had two of the cities had their frontline utility staff workers that knew the clients by name and actually had relationships with the clients. They saw them every month when they paid their bills. When those individuals reached out to recruit participants, they were much more effective at getting take-up than when we had a third-party, for example, financial empowerment provider or another nonprofit in the city that the client didn't know necessarily. It was more difficult for take-up in those cases. So while personalized touch and trust can be more scale that, and that seemed to be still very important to take up.
And I also want to just add that, the city spent quite a bit of time. We worked quite a bit with the cities around trying to engage participants to keep them in the program. One of the things that one of the cities did is they staggered their financial incentives based on milestones. And this was something that I think cities learned along the way. Instead of just offering the incentives at one point, cities learned from one another, and one of the cities decided to stagger it. And we found that to be pretty useful in terms of keeping people engaged and getting them through the full duration of the interventions that we had in place for them.
Mm-hmm. Great, and yes, we've got a question from the audience for you, Denise, around this idea of engagement, in particular as it relates to the financial coaching aspect of the Lift Up platform. What did you see in terms of usage or interest or ongoing engagement with some of the financial counselors across the Lift Up participants?
Yeah, so I would probably say the city of Houston, Texas, was able to design a really interesting financial coaching model. This is one where they were able to receive training. Their utility counselors received training to actually do the coaching in-house. And this is something that did not exist before. I mean, they literally were able to take, the whole concept of financial capability and bring it into the utility themselves. And so what they learned from that is that they were able to learn more about the needs of the customers that they were dealing with. And so in doing that, they were able to establish a rapport with them. And so the customer also responded in terms of reaching out more, staying in touch more. And so there seemed to be a much stronger relationship that developed just based on this initial engagement of kind of, just checking in with them and seeing how they were doing. The Houston program also had another financial counseling model where they had group counseling as well. So you had this comprehensive kind of engagement, both one-on-one as well as a group opportunity to share amongst the pair about some of the issues that they were having. Some of the other cities did some level of coaching as well, such as Newark. But I would probably say that the Houston program really was able to kind of step out of the box and really kind of do quite a bit around engagement.
Terrific, terrific. All right, we are at time, so I would like to thank our guest speakers and all the members of the audience for participating in the webinar. It's been a really rich discussion around all of the great findings that we had from the Financial Capability Innovation Fund. And we see, across these three projects, the National League of Cities helping consumers to reduce utility debt and at times address other aspects of their financial lives. We have Piggy Mojo helping people to build emergency savings that they can use to handle crises from day to day. And Solutions for Progress, My Budget Coach, helping people to develop budgets, pay down debt, and build savings. These are just three examples of the 13 projects that we had in the Financial Capability Innovation Fund, each of which touched on different aspects of people's financial lives and how providers, both nonprofit organizations as well as financial services providers, can adopt strategies that will help consumers adopt the behaviors that will lead to overall improvements in their financial health. So we encourage you to follow us if you're interested in learning more about these findings and innovation strategies. Follow CFSI at the link here on the screen. We're going to be releasing a series of blogs between now and January, which will talk about some of these high-level themes around areas of financial behavior that can be improved, while also giving some insight to each of the different projects. And we hope that some of these insights and the actionable learnings that we're pulling out of the fund will be things that you can take and apply with your own organization. So again, subscribe to CFSI's newsletter at the link here, and you will receive information and updates when new posts are released. I would say we will also be sending out a copy of the recording of this webinar shortly after the event. So if you'd like to share it or go back and find any information, you will have that opportunity. And with that, I will say thank you for listening and wish you all a good day.